Fun. Well, hello there, you in
Hello.
podcast land. Hello. Hi, it's me, Karen Beach, and I am the host of the 21st Century Christian. And I'm excited, people. I'm excited every time I do this show because I like to do it. But I really like today's guest. When she sent me the email, I was like, this is exactly who I'm looking for. Because, yeah, I get a lot of authors and I will put them on, no problem. I like talking about their books. I like talking with musicians, social media people. But there's a place in my heart for real people with real problems that you, as a listener, as a real person with real problems, can relate to. And that is what Marissa Johnson described to me. She has an adoption story. She's dealt with health scares for herself and her husband. She had a grueling medical recovery from a stroke. And she had a problem with adult children who know the faith but haven't really embraced it. So look at all that. You could probably find yourself somewhere in all that. If you can't just, if you didn't just go ahead and check off, okay, that's me. Okay, that's me. Okay, that's not me, but that is my sister. You could check off things that she dealt with. And so we're going to talk to her, and I'm looking forward to it. But first, let's have a word from our sponsor. This podcast episode is brought to you by Concepts and Clarity. It's my company, y'all. And right now we're selling 3 courses designed to make the Bible more accessible and more relatable. All about those sheep. Yeah, I did a course about sheep, but it's actually a really interesting course. And the fourth week, the last week, we go over the 23rd Psalm, and I will tell you something that I guarantee will blow your mind. Like, it will. And then I have Jesus and money. Why is a carpenter talking about money and wealth in a fourth of his parables? We will talk about it, and then we'll look at some of those parables as well. And then we go beyond Proverbs 31. Proverbs 31 describes the ideal woman. Last time I checked, none of us were ideal. So this goes through real women, the gossip, the complainer, all the way to the beautiful and the brave and everything in between. The good thing about the Bible, if you read it, you will find yourself in the pages of the Bible. So, all those courses are for sale and they're reasonably priced. Just go over to my website, conceptsandclarity.com, and get more information or purchase a course. It's up to you.
Did you know?
Did you know a lot of common phrases that we use today in the 21st century started in the Bible? Now, if you like someone, you get along with them well, you say, he's a man after my own heart. You know who else was a man after God's heart? David. And that's where that comes from. For Samuel 13:15 to be exact. In Ecclesiastes 1:9, we find that there's nothing new under the sun. So when you say there's nothing new under the sun, it's really true because the whole phrase comes from the Bible. Solomon said it because he wrote Ecclesiastes. What you often hear in political circles or wherever there's division is you hear a divided house cannot stand. And that comes from the Gospels. It's in Matthew, it's in Mark. And it was spoken by Jesus when they accused him of using satanic powers to do his miracles. So he's like, I can't be Satan and God. It's one or the other. It can't be both. A divided house cannot stand. Going back to the Old Testament, Daniel said, I can see the writing on the wall. And we all know better than to write on walls. I'm sure it was graffiti back then. But if you did write on a wall, it's a warning. And Daniel saw it. And then lastly, we'll end on a positive note. Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 32:10 and Zechariah 2:8. This is, if you're a parent, you might have said your child is the apple of your what? The apple of your eye. That's where that comes from. And that's how God described his relationship with Israel. So the Bible continues to bless us in different ways. And those are 5 ways. Even people that aren't biblical know those sayings. And it's interesting that they all come from the Bible. What else is interesting is Marissa Johanson. And like I said, I interview musicians, authors, social media people, but Marissa is a registered nurse. And I'm not going to lie, she's an author. We'll probably talk about her book, Decide Your Simple System for Getting It Right. I need to read her book because I get it wrong a lot of the time. And it'd be great if I got it right the first time and stopped wasting sometimes years getting it wrong and being like, oh no, I know what I'm doing. And people are like, my friends are like, really, Karen, really? Do you know what you're doing? But we'll talk about her book later. She's here today, not as an author, but primarily as a woman and as a mother to talk about her life, her highs and her lows, and the role her faith plays in getting her through a lot of those lows. And so, Marissa, welcome to 21st Century Christian because you are a 21st Century Christian.
Well, thank you. I am very glad to be here. And you're right. I am a 21st century Christian. There's no doubt about it. I wouldn't be where I've been and gotten through it and lived to tell the tale if I wasn't. So I'm glad to be here.
All right, now your story starts interesting at the beginning. A lot of people, you had a life and it was a regular life until you were 37 and then, all
Mhm.
heck broke loose. But
Mhm.
your life was interesting from the beginning. So take me back to that beginning and let me know what that was like.
Sure. So I was the result of a crisis pregnancy. I was born to a young lady who found out that I was on the way when she was 16 years old. And at the time, she was living with her mother and stepfather. And her stepfather was actually the one who made this discovery and kind of outed her to her mother. She had missed her period for a few months and he realized that it was had been missing because he was keeping an eye out. Now, why would a stepfather keep an eye out? You might wonder.
I
Because
hope not why I think.
he had been abusing her. And that had been going on since she was a young child. And it had taught her that her primary and main value in life was to provide for the entertainment and pleasure of men. And that's what happened. And she was fortunately with her boyfriend. It wasn't just any old person. And then voila, biology does what it does. And I was on my way. So she was discovered to be pregnant by her stepfather and her mother when she was about to the end, getting toward the end of the first trimester. And there was such a bitter dispute that broke out in the family at that moment that she fled from the house, fearing for her very safety and certainly mine. And she ran to a neighbor's house and borrowed some sandals and then walked from her home to a neighboring town, which was the house of her boyfriend, his family. And she sat there on the step waiting for all of them to arrive home from work and wherever they'd been. And when everyone got home, she tearfully told them what happened. You know, basically her life landed at her feet in a million pieces and she didn't know what she was going to do. And they counseled amongst each other and decided, well, our son brought this baby along, so our responsibility is to take care of her. And which was a remarkable thing when you think about it. It's a big responsibility for anybody, parents, anybody. But for these parents who were not her parents, to, take her under their wing was pretty remarkable. And so they did. And one of the blessings that emerged from this was immediately right then. Her boyfriend's father was a pharmaceutical sales rep, and one of his accounts was an OBGYN physician in a nearby town. So he went to this physician and said, "Hey, I hope you can help us out. My son got a girl pregnant, and we need some medical care for the girl." And the physician was a godly man himself, and he said, "You know what? I have no problem doing that, and I'll go one more for you if you need it. My wife and I'll help find her a place to live, even maybe with us if you need it." And he said, "No, we can take care of her housing and look after her, but we really just need help with the medical care." And he said, "Sure, no problem. Bring her on in." So they brought my mother to that medical practice. And back then, this is where the second miracle comes. Back then, there was not um, all the vaccines that we have now and protections for pregnant women. So one of the things that was really a major foe for pregnant women and the unborn child was rubella. And she was tested and she was found to be asymptomatic positive for rubella, which for a developing fetus is devastating. It causes lots of hearing and vision abnormalities and can actually produce results consistent to Helen Keller, for example, or in severe cases, stillborn. Uh, so the variety of severity runs the gamut, but it could be very, very devastating. So she didn't know she was positive because she was asymptomatic at that moment. She didn't feel it. So they went ahead and treated her for it and reassured her that I would be okay. And indeed, it did save my life. I am okay. I do have a little hearing loss here in my left ear, and I have some changes to my retina, probably from that. And then I'll get to this next part later, but I also had a cardiac defect, which I didn't find out about till much later in life.
Mhm.
But, if she had not been engaged in this terrible dispute with her own family, and instead they had accepted the news, they would have put her in the basement and let her get sick. They would not have sought treatment. She would not have had medical care. She would not have had OB support. So even though that was such a terrible and dreadful experience for a teenager who needs their mom at that time more than any other time, it was the right experience for that time because it propelled her out the door and she ran to the right place and she got the right help, not realizing all of that in the moment.
And
And
it's what makes that story so compelling and so interesting is that at the moment, she probably thought that was the worst thing ever. That
she
she
did.
had to leave that her house, her home, and
Hmm.
she had to run. But it's how God works. It ends up
Hmm.
being the best thing for her, the right thing.
Well, what the enemy meant for evil, the Lord turned to good.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. So, I am grateful that she ran to where she ran to. I am grateful that that set of people were the right people. Like it all lined up exactly and specifically how it had to line up in order that I was saved. And it got better from there. She was not in a position to take care of me. I have met her, and she's a wonderful lady. And she told me that she would spend night after night wrestling over what she was going to do. And some of the nights she was like, right, I love this baby. I'm going to keep this baby. And then other nights she would be full of turmoil and think, there's no way I can. What am I thinking? I can't keep this baby. What I can't survive. I can hardly survive on my own. What makes me think I can survive with a baby? And so it was this back and forth that she would struggle through. Well, one of the things that had been provided to her, which she didn't realize at the time either when she was a child, that it was a provision, was that when her and her brothers had been naughty as little kids, they were sent to Sunday school. Their mom sent them to Sunday school because their mom would be at her wits' end and she would think, okay, well, maybe the Lord can do something with these kids because I sure can't. And, and so she and her brothers would go to Sunday school. So she learned in Sunday school that there was a God in heaven who was loving and who loved her specifically. And that one little shred of faith she hung on to for all her might, with all of her might through that pregnancy, believing that God was in her corner and believing that because he was in her corner, a solution would come and that she would be okay and that I would be okay. She hung on to that with all her might and she would pray and cry and beat her pillow. And the physician that was taking care of her happened to have a colleague who was a pediatrician. And the pediatrician was located further north than where she lived, but not terribly far away. And he reached out to his colleague and said, hey, I have a teenager here who's going to be giving birth in December. And she's decided, after a lot of thought, she's decided the best solution is to put the baby up for adoption. Again, another miracle because what was coming of age back in the late 60s? Abortion.
Wow.
She decided not to get an abortion. She decided that it was wrong and she should not do that. And for a girl who had no options and no resources, that's a pretty amazing decision. She did not get selfish in the moment. She did not get overwhelmed with fear in the moment, even though she was scared to death. But she did exactly what we are taught is the definition of courage. She walked through her fear anyway
That's
because she,
powerful for a 16-year-old too.
for a 16-year-old, especially one who had been taught that she didn't have much value. It's just a series of miracles, one after the other, right there in that short 9-month period. And yeah, and so I came along right after her 17th birthday. She turned 17 in November, and I was born in December. And the physician had reached out to his colleague, and his colleague happened to have a medical assistant working in his office who had adopted a little boy a couple of years earlier, and they had decided they were ready to adopt again. And they wanted to know if I was a girl or not. Well, back then, gender reveal ultrasound wasn't a thing. Ultrasound was a technology available, but it was only done to rule out extremely worrisome uh,
Right.
things. It was just not routine. So there was no ultrasound done, and so they had to decide, sight unseen, if they were going to adopt me or not. And they decided they talked about it with each other and said a few prayers, and they decided they would go ahead and go through with this adoption. So they had really wanted a girl because they already had a boy. So they were very excited when they heard that I was born and that I was a girl. And so they came down to where I was born and picked me up at the age of 30 hours. I had to be observed in the NICU. I mean, they didn't have a NICU, but in the nursery for a little while, just because of that history with the rubella. They wanted to make sure that their testing could demonstrate that I was healthy and that I could hear and that I could see. And all of the answers to those questions, as far as they were able to test, were yes. I was healthy, I could see, and I could hear. And so at the age of 30 hours, I went home with my adoptive parents and was raised in their home, which again was another one of those blessings because of them. I was able to get a good education and become the nurse that I am, and never had to worry about things like education, healthcare, housing, food, clothing. All of that stuff was provided for me because I had another set of parents that were ready to stand in the gap and love me and raise me. And it wasn't perfect. I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't perfect. There were moments that through my upbringing that were extremely difficult, but I would challenge any human being on the earth to cite a completely trouble-free, perfect, just wonderful child. Nobody has that.
No,
Nobody has that.
I think, I don't know if it's because of TV or it's because of social media, but we've been conditioned to think people need to be perfect. I think a
Mhm.
lot of times the divorce rate is as high as it is because people are like, oh, well, I fell out of love with you. Well, did you really, or
Well, then fall back into it.
did your love just evolve? Because you're not
Yeah.
always going to be, oh, you're so cute all the
Yeah.
time. That
Right.
it evolves beyond that. It changes. People change. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago.
No.
I'm not the same
No.
person I was 2 years ago. So when you get with someone, you have to commit to being with them through their changes, through their
Hmm.
growth. Nobody, I want what we used to have. And the operative word there is used to, because, even if you stay right where you are, same job, same house, same car, life is going to keep lifing. You're going
Yes.
to change, you're going to
Yes.
grow. And even though nothing seems like it changes, you change. The
Hmm.
person you're with changes. And
Well,
you
that
to decide every day to stick with that person through those changes.
that becomes the only thing that's constant, right? Is the changes.
And it's
Yeah.
scary, but it's true. The only thing that changes, I've changed over time, whether I wanted to or not. And
Yeah.
sometimes you I would love to be the size that I was when I was 22.
Yeah. I know, I get it.
Do I want to be that 22-year-old? No.
No.
No, my father told me once, my dad, he was like, you realize that if jumping to conclusions was an Olympic event, you'd be a gold medalist.
Oh, oh no.
I'd be like, yeah. I mean, because me and my dad are close. We're close. He died last year, but my mom
Oh,
died when I was in high school. And there'd be
oh.
times I talk to him that, well, this boy did this, that, and the other. And then I realized I was wrong and he really didn't do that. But now he won't talk to me because I made a big scene. And my dad is like,
Mhm.
he's like, next time, just call me. Don't
Yeah.
call me. Just call me.
Yeah.
call me and talk to me
Yeah.
about it. And I'm like, because I don't understand why he don't want to talk to me. And like, of course, my dad's like, of course he don't
Yeah.
want to talk to you. Because
Yeah. He
you're,
doesn't trust you. Yeah.
yes, yes, sweetheart. I love you to death, but you're kind of crazy. You kind of got that crazy gene. He's
Yeah.
probably from your mother. I'm like, how do why are you gonna say that? It could be
Yeah.
from you. But
Yeah.
speaking of that, tell me about your marriage.
Oh, I've been married to the same wonderful guy for 33 years, going on 34 years. We met when we were children. Actually, we don't remember meeting each other. You know, a lot of people have these stories. Oh, well, we met doing this or we met doing that. I don't have that because I don't remember. And he doesn't remember either. We were that small. I think we met in church, you know, going to church. And so we were real tiny in the tiny tots cradle roll division and and we just always knew each other. But we didn't have any really relationship other than friendship with each other until we got into college, which was the right thing because you've also we talked earlier about phrases and sayings that come from the Bible. Now this one probably didn't come from the Bible. I'm pretty sure it didn't. But you've heard the saying familiarity breeds contempt.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing that, kids grow up and then they get interested in each other, right? If they get interested in each other too soon, the other party might become too familiar and the contempt might set in. I don't know. So for us, it was good. We didn't date or do anything until we were in college. We moved in slightly different circles, so that was part of the reason why. And then our families knew each other but didn't hang out with each other socially much and that kind of thing. So yeah, but we grew up going to school together, and just kind of hung out in different friend groups and circles. And then when we got into college, then things were starting to get more interesting. Um, I think we knew that the other was on the planet during high school. Definitely, we knew each other was on the planet. We'd caught sight of each other, but we didn't take any action on it. And it was the right thing. And so, anyway, we've been married now for almost 34 years. We have two daughters where we've got these two silly dogs, and have a good life. We have a good life together.
That is good, but even in the midst of that good life with those kids, you've had your share of health challenges,
Hmm.
both you
Yeah.
and your husband. So talk to me
Yeah.
about that a little bit.
Sure. So I've spent most of my life fairly healthy. As a young child, I had a lot of ENT problems, ear, nose, and throat. Don't know that they were really related to the rubella status of my gestation. I don't think they were. But I was really a pretty healthy kid, had a few allergies and whatever. Nothing stellar. Then when I got to my was I was 52. In my 51st year of life, I was working in my job and I had become unawares exposed to a patient with tuberculosis. And because I didn't know the patient had tuberculosis and a few other factors, I got tuberculosis from that patient.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so it did not turn into active disease. It was diagnosed as a latent case of tuberculosis, and which is treatable. You treat it with prophylactic medication, and then the person has like about a 95% chance of never contracting active tuberculosis disease, or maybe 90% chance. So I asked for the medication, and the workers' comp carrier for my job refused and said that I didn't meet criteria because my chest x-ray was clear. And I was like, but I'm over the age of 50, and the American Lung Association would advise that I get treated people that are over the age of 50 should be treated for tuberculosis prophylactically with a latent case of TB.
What does
So
prophylactically mean?
that means preventatively. In other words, you get treated, and the objective is to prevent you from advancing on to full-blown active
Okay.
tuberculosis disease. Right.
Okay.
So I asked for that, and they said no, and I was like, that seems very irregular. And then, right about that time of year, this was toward the end of 2019. It was right around this time of year in 2019 that I found out I was positive. And I was headed off to enjoy Thanksgiving with family and friends in Utah. And I was like, wow, uh, I have to go out there and be thankful. And right now, I'm having a hard time feeling thankful because I just found out I had TB. But anyway, I thought, I'm just not, tuberculosis develops slowly and I have time. This isn't something that's super time critical. I am going to put this aside and I will deal with this later. I'm going to go off and have holidays with my family, and we're going to get through the holiday season and I can fight over this next year. Like, I don't have to fight about this right now and ruin the holidays. So I did. I put it aside, went out and had Thanksgiving. I think while I was out there, I got a chest x-ray that showed that I didn't have active disease. And so then when I picked up the discussion again, they were like, well, we did that chest x-ray and you don't have active disease. So, we're not treating anything. Well, I had also started hearing about this little thing called SARS-CoV-2 brewing and coming out of China, and it had already hit US shores. And now, as nurses, we get a little bit of advance warning sometimes. We'll get, industry specific emails and alerts and that kind of thing. And so I don't know if I got it that way or how, but anyway, I had heard that it was hitting the United States, and I thought, well, that moved awfully quick. Like, I think that must be an airborne illness for it to have gotten out of China and over here so quickly.
Right.
So, anyway, then along came March of 2020 when the United States government finally admitted, along with every other world government, we're having a pandemic, a global pandemic.
Right.
And I was like, okay, this changes things as far as I'm concerned quite a bit. And then add to that, before China stopped sharing information, I had found an observational study out of China that showed that people who had latent or active tuberculosis disease had a much more difficult course of illness with poor outcomes if they got COVID. And I thought, well, I'm not interested in a difficult course, and I sure don't want to find out what poor outcomes means. Poor outcomes could be death, it could be a lung transplant. I don't want any of those. I've taken care of lung transplants as a nurse. I want no part of it. No. So I got a hold of the comp carrier again and the employee health nurse at work, and I said, okay, listen, this changes things quite a bit. I think that I'm not content to find out with what a rough course of disease process and poor outcomes means, and you shouldn't be either, because I'm your responsibility when I'm on the clock for you, and I got this when I was on the clock for you. So, I, the workers' comp insurance company, they went through their algorithm and they said, well, you don't meet criteria. And I was like, well, that's really interesting to me because I can't understand where you got that criteria. It doesn't fit with the American Lung Association. And secondly, we don't know what we're doing with COVID, but we do know what to do with tuberculosis. So I think that we need to do something about the one of either of these pulmonary processes could kill me. We need to do something about the one that we know what to do with.
It's so interesting. It's so good, first of all, that you're a registered nurse. And so you knew what questions to ask, where the concern was. But even people who aren't nurses, it feels like a lot of times we have to advocate for ourselves.
100%.
We have
I
to
a
be our
hundred
own
percent.
advocates. I know as an African American woman, I've heard that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we get less painkillers because we're supposed to be naturally um higher pain. But if I'm in pain and I need help, I'm going to advocate until I get that help. And you know, your voice matters and you have to
Mm-hmm.
speak up for
You have to use
yourself.
it. You have to use it. And I did this time. I mean, I had to use it. I was like, I'm sorry, guys, but I simply do not agree. And I have evidence here that supports my position. And so the comp carrier asked for what I had, the observational study that I had, and I sent it into them. And she goes, okay, I'm going to put you on hold here for a minute. She put me on hold. She went to underwriting department. They discussed it. And about a half an hour later, she came back on the line and she said, we agree. And I was like, oh, thank God they agree.
Wow.
So, yeah, she said, we agree. We will pay for prophylaxis. Um, so it just is a matter of you getting with the health department or whoever the occupational health doctor is. Well, the occupational health doctor in our area had underlying his own underlying autoimmune disorder and disease processes, and he didn't want to be around anybody. And so he handed it off to my family doctor, who agreed to follow me for it and take care of it. And so she was able to order the medication. And so then I spent 4 months being on that medication. And then when I came off the medication after the 4 months was up, a few weeks later, I had a stroke. And uh, yeah, and I thought, well, I was just starting to feel good again, you know, because the medication, you don't feel very good when you're taking the medication. So I was like, well, okay, um, this sucks. And so I that was another episode where decision making became so important. It's so easy. I did not realize until I went through it myself. And if I can take and leave one idea in everybody's head, that is the idea to ask for help. Decide that you need help and ask for it. Because I was falling rapidly down into this can't be happening. I mean, how many times do we have that happen when something's going wrong and we'll say, oh, this can't be happening? And so I was like, well, this can't be happening. Well, it was happening. And I asked for help, and it's a good thing. And I was happened to be at work, which was also a good thing. We had launched and been canceled en route, and so returned back to base. And again, here's where the blessings start up. I had felt something go kind of wrong in the morning when I was driving to work, but fortunately, it didn't go full blast wrong because I was able to safely get to work and not hurt anybody in the car and not hurt myself and all that.
Thank goodness.
Then, thank goodness, yeah. Then we were launched to go take care of a patient, and the launch call was canceled and we returned to quarters. And again, that's a blessing. What if I had gone all the way to a scene of a call? Because I work on a helicopter. What if we'd gone all the way to the scene of a call and I stroked over there? Then my poor partner would have been stuck with two patients. And, it would have. So, anyway, God is good. So I was on the ground back at base when it happened. And I was able to tell her, I think there's a problem. And I wasn't able to articulate things. Sometimes I couldn't get to the words, like I still struggle with it, like I just did. I couldn't get to the words that I wanted to use. I knew what I wanted to talk about, but they call that expressive aphasia. And I was able to articulate words, but I wasn't always able to get to the ones that I wanted to use to
Right.
talk to her.
Did writing
So,
help? Writing it down?
well, no, by the time I was developing that symptom, we were in her car on the way to the hospital. And I wouldn't have made any sense riding in the car. I mean, it would have been a mess. So, I mean, it could have helped possibly as long as, you're able to run the pin, but my right hand had started to get very heavy and numb and tingly and didn't want to work very well.
Wow.
So, and I'm right-handed. So anyway, she promptly did the exact right response, got up out of her chair, ran and got her car keys and said to the pilot, "Put this base out of service and help me get her to the car. We're going to the hospital." So we went to the hospital and she ran in and called a stroke alert. And I had my head scanned. They didn't see any bleeding, which is good. The strokes that bleed into the brain are worse than the strokes that make a clot in their way. They're all bad, but we were grateful that there was no bleeding. And so then I talked to a stroke neurologist on the phone. Another great decision by the ER doctor to allow me to talk to the stroke physician on the phone. And she said, "Look, your baseline health is good. I think you really would benefit from having a thrombolytic, which is a clot busting drug. And we just need to get your blood pressure down because that was the other thing. My blood pressure was sky high, and I never have high blood pressure. But it's the body's way of trying to shove blood around the clot and still feed brain tissue past the clot. So we had to get my blood pressure to come down, and then they were able to give me the medication. And about 20 minutes or so after I had that medication, my symptoms cleared completely, and I had a really good result. And so then I was sent to the ICU, and I spent 4 days in the ICU alone because it was COVID pandemic time, and my husband and family weren't allowed to come to the hospital, which was very hard on them. It was hard on my husband to not be able to come. It was hard for me too, but because my native environment is hospitals, it didn't bother me like it does, I think, other people. Um, and then I was discharged home and sent home on a very hefty dose of um, anticoagulant. I had to take a very strong anticoagulant, and I was worried the whole time that I was going to, cut myself or fall or do something and bleed. And I didn't. So I was grateful for that. And then uh, just had to find the right path for healthcare, which involved a bunch more decision making, and I was able to find a doctor who was willing to look at my heart. We discovered in the workup for my stroke, that's where this next birth defect comes. I did have a little hole between the right and left atrium, the top chambers of the heart, and there shouldn't have been a hole there. And that was why a clot went, instead of to my lungs where it should have gone, it went
Wow.
to, yeah, it went down to the left ventricle and then up to my brain. And so that's why I had a stroke. But anyway, I found a doctor that would fix this hole in my heart. I was worried that I was going to have a hard time. In fact, I'd been told by one cardiologist that he wouldn't touch it because the stroke neurologist said that he just wanted me to be on the anticoagulant and not get the hole fixed in my heart. And I was like, from my cardiac background as a nurse, another blessing, I knew that closing that heart
Well done.
little was the right work. And I really felt very compelled about it. I think that it's true for some people, maybe you don't, but I was too active to sit around and not do anything like most people who are anticoagulated must do. They must be a lot quieter in their lifestyle. And I'm not that person. I climb in and out of helicopters for a living. I snow ski. I water ski. I have dogs. I ride bicycle. I mean, I just was not willing to
Give
sit
up.
down in my chair and be done. So I didn't, and I found a good doctor in Chicago. Dr. Kavinsky was wonderful. I loved him dearly, and I was grateful that he fixed my heart. So yeah, I have had a few challenges come my way with regard to health.
Okay, so we're running out of time. I want to end with the thing that I think a lot of people are going to relate to. even if they can't relate to your health scare or your adoption story, a lot of parents can relate to their children kind of walking away from their faith,
Hmm.
even though they've seen what you went through,
Hmm.
even though they know the stories, they know the morals, something within them has them walk away. What is that like?
Well, it's painful. It's just flat out painful. Parents want to believe that their kids have a harmonious perspective with their own, because that's how we raised them. We raised them and poured all this good stuff into them. But here's the good news, and I want to really emphasize this, is that if you know you've done your level best to pour the right things into your children, we are promised in the pages of scripture that God will pick up and the Holy Spirit will pick up where we left off and continue the good work within us until it's brought to its completion.
Sure.
And I draw a lot of strength and comfort off of that verse because I don't for 1 minute think I was the world's answer to perfect positive parenting. I've made mistakes as a parent. I think every parent can really line up right next to me and say, "Yep, I did too." But our God is gracious and he loves us and he loves our children more than we do. And he has promised to finish the good work that was started. And I am holding that promise. I am holding him to that promise and I am holding on to that promise for myself. My kids believe that God is real. I'm pretty sure they do, but they have chosen to want to do their lives the way they want to do them. And the other thing I know about God is that he is a patient God. He's patient, and the other thing I don't need to be scared about, because perfect love casts out all fear, is that because that love of God is as perfect and as big and as strong as it is, I can stop being scared. I dedicated these babies to them when they were babies, and I pray over them regularly. And one thing that I learned recently that I found so helpful, and I'll just pass it along, was from Dr. Tim Jennings. He is a psychiatrist and he has a website, comeandreason.com. But he talked about in one of his lessons that I was looking at, parents, don't pray for power for your kids. And why not? Because kids are still too young and they're still immature, even if they're young adults, to know what to do with all that power. Pray instead that your kids want the truth. Pray for them to understand and discover the truth with the Holy Spirit leading. And so that's my prayer has changed a little. I'm praying that my kids want to be in the truth. They want to be with God. And I really believe that Jesus does answer us. And maybe we never see the answer in our natural lifetime. That doesn't mean, though, that we will never see the answer. We just don't see it right now. And so I just want to throw out there for parents, hang on to that. You might not see the answer you wish to see in this lifetime, but that doesn't mean that you will never see the answer. You may very well at some day future in the heaven.
Okay. That is a good place to end this on. I'm going to do a quick little sponsorship message and then I'm going to come back because I have a verse especially for you when you're dealing with your kids. And of course, listeners, you can use it as well. It's everybody knows train up a child in the way he should go. And I was like, there needs to be something else. And I found something else. And that I think should speak to you. Okay. This podcast episode is brought to you by Concepts and Clarity, 3 courses on sheep, money, and Jesus, women of the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's designed to inform you, to help you make sense of archaic concepts, and encourage you to open and read your Bible. On the first page of my site, I have a free lesson right now. It's 5 things that aren't in the Bible at all. Cleanliness is not next to godliness. And there's 4 other free things there. So our virtuous verse, and this is what I want you to see, uh, Marissa. It comes from Jeremiah 31, verses 16 and 17. And it says, "Thus says the Lord, keep your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for there is a reward for your work, declares the Lord. And they shall come back from the land of the enemy. There,
Amen.
there is hope for your future, declares the Lord, and your children shall come back to their own country."
Amen.
And that is what I wanted to leave you with, because they might have walked away, but they, somewhere deep in their heart, is still God.
Mhm.
And He is there. And
Mhm.
at some point, they will come back. I guarantee it. And that's what it says. Keep your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears. There's a
Amen.
reward for your work. And they shall come back from the land of the enemy, declares the Lord, and your children shall come back to their own country. Are
Mhm.
you familiar with that?
I think I've read it, but it's been a long time, and I love that verse. That is a wonderful verse, and it is so encouraging and reassuring to me as a mother and to every parent out there that anguishes over their kids and prays and pleads with the Lord. I plead with the Lord on my kids' behalf all the time, and other people's kids too, not just my own. I I'm over here praying over other kids too, because these kids, I mean, the mental health problems for kids right now is really serious,
Sure.
and prayer is a big part of the intervention.
It certainly is. Marissa, thank you so much for coming by the 21st Century Christian. I love your story. I love hearing how your adoption worked out. I loved hearing about how strong your marriage is, um, that you overcame such health obstacles, and that you were an advocate for yourself, which is what so many of us
Hmm.
need to be. And we need to be
Yes.
that, even if we're not registered nurses. We
No.
still need to advocate for ourselves
Keep
and
asking questions. Keep asking questions.
asking questions and demanding an answer and not letting
Hmm.
ourselves be blown off.
I love
And
that.
that is what we're going to end today on. So come back next week for another episode of the 21st Century Christian. We will encourage you, inspire you, and give you hopefully something that makes your faith walk that much easier. Bye.